Moneysense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
Good morning and welcome to Moneysense. I'm your host Neville Hicks alongside co-host Christophe Barnett.
Good morning.
We've got another great show lined up and we have the pleasure of having Jude Scott, CEO of Cayman Finance, in our studio again this morning. Welcome, Jude.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here.
We're kind of following up on our discussion 2 weeks ago, talking a little bit about more the financial community and somewhat of the importance of Cayman Finance. As CEO, Jude, maybe it'd be helpful for the audience just to give a little bit of background as to what Cayman Finance is, who it supports, and the efforts that you're making today.
Absolutely. You know, we're very privileged that Cayman Finance actually represents the entire financial services industry. So we represent all the sectors in the industry. And our primary focus is protecting, promoting, developing, and growing the Cayman Islands financial services industry. We work very closely with the Cayman Islands government, primarily through the Ministry of Financial Services. Also work very closely with a regulator, the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we have good, strong products and services that we can effectively legislate and regulate, and also then promoting those products and services in the jurisdictions that are suitable for our clients.
Okay. And that's kind of a broad base. Are there, particular industries, finance, everyone hears finances, and it's kind of one of those words where I think a lot of people's eyes kind of glaze over. What specific industries do you support within Cayman?
Sure. I'm glad you asked that question. We actually, when I took over the role, one of the things that we did was actually develop an industry visual. So a simple way of representing what the industry actually looks like. And that's in our current magazine. So if folks haven't had a chance to see that, it's on page 10 of the magazine.
Where can we get that magazine?
So either from Cayman Finance itself, or if you reach out to the website, it's available on the website, or you can request it from Cayman Finance's website.
Okay.
There's also an electronic version of it, which is an electronic page flip, so it's easy to access that and send it on to others. The visual starts with clients at the center, and then our core sectors immediately surrounding that. So one sector would be investment funds and asset management. Another would be banking, then insurance and reinsurance, capital markets, trusts, and then we have a category for other, which would be things that don't fall squarely in that. And to give you an example of what a sector would represent is, let's say in the insurance sector, that would represent insurance clients, so perhaps an insurance captive company.
Sure.
It would also represent the service providers for that sector, so an insurance manager, as well as in the associations within that sector. In this case, you recall from a couple of weeks ago, IMAC is an association that represents the insurance managers.
Absolutely.
And so those are our main sectors. Wrapped around that in the visual would then be the service providers that provide services across all of the sectors.
Okay.
Fiduciary services, legal services, public accounting services.
Right. So it's a big role and responsibility that you guys are taking on, because you look across Cayman, there's, I guess, two pillars. Historically, I think, you have the finance pillar, you've got the tourism pillar, and then now expanding into the healthcare pillar. How big is that? How big is that finance pillar, and what does that represent?
We're very fortunate that over the years we've built a very successful financial services industry here. And so the financial services industry really is the key driver of our economy. So it makes up over 50% of our economy. So over $1.5 billion US every year is actually produced in the financial services industry. In addition to that, it generates more than 50% of our government's revenue.
Wow. Okay. And when you say 1.5 billion, how is that generated, and how does that impact the Cayman community?
Absolutely. So that's the value of the services that are being provided. So that then allows the organizations to, for example, pay salaries, It allows then the companies are actually paying fees into government. So well over $300 million of that is generated and actually expended with our government to support things like our road systems, to allow government to actually give government scholarships, provide healthcare services, emergency services, etc. We're also within the industry. We're quite fortunate in that we're an industry that have a significant number of Caymanians employed directly in the industry. And the statistics we have access to now show that at least 2,700 Caymanians are employed in the industry. And that actually doesn't even include Caymanians employed in public accounting firms and law firms. So the number is significantly higher than that.
Wow.
So we are fortunate that it provides tremendous employment opportunities. It's also, one of the things we've really focused on promoting as well is the nature of jobs that are careers that are provided in the financial services industry really tick 3 boxes that I think are very important to our people. One is the careers provide upward mobility. They also provide career pathing, and you access globally transferable skills.
Right.
So someone who is successful in our industry here in the Cayman Islands, if they choose to either temporary or otherwise travel and live in other places around the world, those skill sets are of value in those other markets as well.
Well, I think that that number alone is quite surprisingly high, vis-a-vis the 2,700, and that doesn't include the accounting firms and the law firms either.
That's correct.
Okay.
They currently under our ESO statistics are categorized in a category different from financial services. They fall under professional.
So I guess the next question is Cayman from a finance jurisdiction and offshore leader has come a tremendous way in the last 30 years, 40 years. What are Cayman's advantages versus other offshore jurisdictions, and how do we kind of stay ahead of the curve?
Traditionally we looked at those things from how we saw ourselves. What we did this year is we really focused on going out to key industry stakeholders in our target marketplaces and asked them, what do you find most important of selecting the jurisdiction? Mm-hmm. And as we filtered through all of that data, it really narrowed it down to 4 key things that really differentiate us. One is the quality and talent of our professional service providers. And, that's then expressed in various different ways. They talk about bench strength. They talk about operating on the same basis of responsiveness as New York or London. So that really always rises to the top, is the quality of our people and that mix of people, both internationally who have come here, as well as local grown talent, working together to deliver that service. The second that we found is our appropriate legislative and regulatory balance.
Certainly.
And that's really expressed very well in that it's underpinned by a court system that has a financial services division, which has in its judges panel actually judges experienced in financial services. So that then provides a level of certainty that those doing transactions within the Cayman Islands have a good understanding if those transactions go to court, how they'll be interpreted by the court system. The third thing is with regard to the strong support of the government and the regulator for the industry, that continues to be a hallmark for us. Their willingness to work with us on legislation, to work on appropriate regulation, has been tremendous. The fourth one then is just innovation. Our ability to continue to innovate products and services for the jurisdiction. The most recent one we've developed that we're going to be taking to market early in January of next year is the LLC legislation. So this will be the first time that type of legislation is successfully implemented in an offshore jurisdiction like ourselves.
Just getting back to the statistics for a moment, because I think some of those are quite surprising to hear, especially when we hear things like the accountants and lawyers in the financial industry not being counted, per se, in that industry. So when we look back in the last 5-10 years, we've all known that tourism and finance, like Neville said, are the pillars of our economy. But when we look back has the contribution of the financial sector to the government? I mean, if it's $300 million, that sounds like over 50% of government revenue.
That's correct.
If I'm correct there. Has it always been about that range, 50-50? Has it been growing in its contribution?
I don't have the specific stats, but based on the trends that we're looking at, probably for the last few years, it's been roughly around that.
Okay.
I think our biggest challenge is as a country, we've relied more on gut feel than actually looking at the actual statistics and
Sure.
evaluating those in context. And I'll give you an example of that. Last year, before I came on board Cayman Finance, there was a survey that was done. And so the questions that were asked to folks is, with regard to government revenue, which do you think provides more revenue to government, financial services or tourism?
Certainly.
And the majority of people at that time thought it was tourism that provided most revenue. They were also asked, financial services or tourism, which do you think the government spends the most on? And at that time, the majority of people thought government spent most on financial services. So I think we really have an obligation to make sure that all of our good people are better informed
Certainly.
of the facts. I think there's also an obligation from government's perspective to make sure that that information is effectively disseminated, because it's one thing for us as the industry to be sharing that good news. But I think government also needs to take ownership of that and also credit, because they've played a part in helping to grow this, so that we truly are understanding this validated information of how very large this industry is and how important it is to the country.
Certainly. I mean, I think it's about, as you mentioned, about recognizing and then improving and innovating. And to your point, if government can give support and promotion to the financial services sector and the value that it adds to the Cayman community at large, then I certainly agree with you that we're better off. I know, Jude, you've done run some numbers on that and touching a little bit. And I don't think it's a tourism versus finance argument here. It's really those are both massive pillars, but I think putting it in context vis-a-vis, what does government get as far as a return on its dollars spent?
We actually did some analysis on that just very recently. Because we thought it was very important if we're going to push for government to properly focus and support in the industry, we wanted to make sure it could be validly supported by government's own information. And what we found out just using government's budget, and obviously that's a very, very large Bible of information.
Sure.
So just publicly available information drilling into that is we were able to determine that for every dollar that government spends on the financial services industry, it generates approximately $18 in revenue for government.
Okay, wow.
And when we compare that to tourism, and obviously you'll know from my history, I'm a big supporter and proponent of tourism. I think it's important for us to properly support that. But just in comparison for our second pillar, tourism, for every dollar that government spends on tourism, it generates about $2 in revenue for government. So financial services is just a huge, huge driver of revenue for our government.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. We're going to take a break, but please join us when we return, and we'll continue this chat with Jude Scott, CEO of Cayman Finance.
This is
Moneysense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands and sponsored by OneTradeX.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense. I'm your host, Neville Hicks, along with co-host Christophe Barnett. In studio this morning, we've got Jude Scott, CEO of Cayman Finance. And the first half of the show, Jude certainly outlined some incredible stats and the impact that the financial services industry has within the Cayman Islands. I think taking that, some of those numbers and talking about the impact, but what about employment? That's oftentimes an issue that comes up.
Yeah, you mentioned 2,700 Caymanians employed in the sector, and myself being Caymanian, born, raised, educated here, I was a beneficiary of the financial industry. I got a scholarship to go off to school as an accountant, and then was able to get some experience there in the first few years. So maybe we can talk about some of those opportunities, because that's what I'm excited about when I see Caymanians benefiting and getting jobs and education and so on. So maybe expand on some of the opportunities that go into that 2,700 number.
That's a great point. And like yourself, I was also a recipient of a scholarship from a public accounting firm to go off to attend university and then return back to be part of the industry. It's been an industry for probably 30 plus years that has had very structured programs of trying to attract talented young Caymanians straight out of high school, provide them with scholarship opportunities to go internationally and actually develop just very, very strong skills and then international certifications or qualifications for it. And that's been something that has been done for 30 plus years by many of the organizations within the financial services industry. I think one of the challenges that we have as a country is sometimes we sort of pit organizations against the other without really giving credit for how much good they're doing. And what I've seen many times over the years is, for example, one organization will say, we're very pleased to announce that we've given 2 scholarships to these young talented Caymanians. Mm-hmm. And then you may hear a little Mar Road rumor, well, gee, they only gave 2. I know company X gave 3 last year. Shame on. But the reality is when we add up all of these scholarships and all of these internships and opportunities that have been provided and continue to be provided to Caymanians, it's tremendous, and it stacks up to multiples of what any other industry in the country has been able to do.
Well, we got to think past that headline number too, right? Because there's obviously Caymanians employed there already, and their education budgets within the company. And so again, I'm pleased when I go around just in the industry and I bump into Caymanians who are already employed, and then I see them getting additional certifications, obviously supported by the companies. I talk to the bosses, and they're proud of them and happy to see that type of thing happening. So there's more than just, let's not be, just not see that headline number and have despair, because there's tremendous opportunity. Now, beyond just the headline jobs where you can be an accountant or a banker or so on, what other opportunities are there? Not everyone's an accountant. Not everyone's a lawyer. So what are some of those other jobs that are in the finance industry?
We shared just a very short list when we did our student education work experience program with the students. And some of those roles, for example, were marketing professionals, HR professionals, fund administrators, corporate administrators, secretaries, actuaries, IT professionals, and really the list could go on and on. The other thing that we shared that we felt was very interesting is also to help our talented people recognize that you don't just have to have sort of a financial focus, but really when you look at sort of the skills that are very valuable and useful in the industry in supporting what we do. For example, researchers, persons who are part of our compliance teams. You can have folks that are focused and have strong skills in creativity and design, maybe part of our marketing teams. We'll have folks in our HR departments that have psychology degrees, because they're able to provide value and understanding. How do we help support, motivate our people and help them to be their best? There may be folks with biomed experience who are part of investment teams. Audio video training, folks who are able to manage projects. So these are all skill sets that are not traditionally considered to be part of it, but they're able to be very, very valuable in supporting it.
I agree. I think the common, to Christoph's point, I think the common misconception is, the finance community, you need to be, an accountant or a lawyer or, but thinking outside the box, call it. There's infrastructure around it that really creates employment for a number of people in a wide-ranging, specifications. You mentioned, Jude, the was it an symposium put on by for the students, or just earlier? Can you expand on that a little bit about that, and how do people find out a little bit more about these various jobs? And
absolutely. So what we did earlier in this year is we recognized that although the financial services industry, the individual organizations have over the years and continue to provide so many scholarships and job opportunities and development and training, that government had recently run some statistics which showed that although unemployment had been falling in the country, specifically in our young Caymanians, I think it was age 18 to 25, unemployment has been rising. So we sat with the Minister of Employment and Minister of Education and just said, how is that possible? I know the financial services industry is doing so much. And even though we make up more than 50% of the economy, we only make up about 15% of the workforce.
Right.
So we just took a step back and we said, look, there's really only 4 outcomes for young people coming out of our schooling system. Either 1, we employ them, or 2, they go off to tertiary education, and then we need to employ them.
Mm-hmm.
Or 3, they become dependent on social services, or 4, they resort to crime to support themselves.
Right.
As a healthy society, we don't want the latter 2. We want to ensure the economy as a whole are properly creating pathways for those young people to come in. So what we did is we basically just said there's 350 students that were graduating in 2015 from the government high school.
Okay.
We applied 15% to that, and we said, in addition to all the other great things we're doing, we are going to specifically visibly show how to create meaningful pathways for 15% of those kids. So we took 50 kids into our program. And so we built a program in 2 months that had 3 key elements to it. One was workshops over an 8-week period, which helped explain the industry, explain career opportunities, and provide them with soft skills, which we felt in many cases they were lacking. And the soft skills are necessary to survive and be able to be successful in the business world. The other thing we did was we arranged for 50 top key executives within the industry to actually be mentors, one-on-one, with each of these students over that 8-week period.
Okay.
So they now have access to people who are global leaders in the marketplace. And then the third thing we did is we recognized that this particular grouping of students, the dual enrollment students in government schools, had no access to a formal work experience. So we arranged for our Cayman Finance member firms to actually provide a month of work experience in the summer, paid work experience. And it was just a fantastic success of pathwaying and helping our young people to really see the opportunities that are available to them. And, the feedback we got is 95% of the students rated it as very good or excellent.
Wow, fantastic. So where does it go from here? Does it grow? I know it's something you guys get your hands full, but does it get bigger from here? Or?
Absolutely. We've had so much demand for it that we've actually been working on relaunching it now for 2016. And, it's still some details to be worked out, but we're definitely going to be doing it in 2016. We're probably going to be expanding it. One of the things I've asked for, and I'm going to see if we can get permission to do this, is actually expand it so it's available to all the Caymanian students in public as well as private schools. We'll obviously have to limit the numbers.
Certainly.
But what we'll look to do is look at that full demographic and try to accommodate 15% of all of those.
Wow.
And so we'll seek to have probably an application process. Then it becomes fully available to any Caymanian students in the graduating classes of those. The other thing that we're going to do as well is we believe that it is important for us to figure out how to integrate into the curriculum strong knowledge of the financial services industry. And so we're going to add then some of the workshop training to the 2 years prior to the graduating class.
Okay.
So we gradually start introducing knowledge at earlier levels when kids are choosing subjects.
Certainly. So we've touched on a number of things. I mean, it's clear that financial services has a tremendous impact on the Cayman economy. What the financial services industry is doing for young Caymanians via this program sounds incredible. I guess my question is how, where is all this support and funding coming from, and how much does the government actually support Cayman finance?
So, this has been a very interesting question, and it's really been a challenge for many, many years. Our governments have not properly understood the importance of them fully supporting and funding the financial services industry. And we really go back to, it's been historic with our governments. You know, up until this government, and really credit to this government, this is the first time in our history we actually have a ministry of financial services.
Right.
Bearing in mind, this is our largest pillar of the economy. We've never actually even had a ministry prior to this. But in addition to that, when we look at the support, so for example, Cayman Finance, all of our funding really comes from the industry itself. So member firms. Right. We have arrangements with government where they're meant to do co-marketing with us, and they've set aside about $100,000 to do that. But there's also huge deficiencies in our ability to get laws drafted. So Cayman Finance has had to agree to fund that to the tune of about $110,000 to ensure that we have proper legal drafting resources in place so that we can get laws, regulations passed. So we're doing everything we can to help support and drive that. I think the challenge is that in many realms, I think people unfortunately look at it and say, well, you know, financial services industry, it's only, you know, rich accountants and lawyers. Why should the government spend anything on it? But when we take a step back, this industry is providing incredible opportunities for a country. It really is driving our economy, and it really needs to have proper attention and support from our government. And the more we can support this industry, the better it is able to actually support our country and help us drive it forward, while also being very synergistic with things like tourism and development in our country. And I just want to share just one example that, you know, I continue to be so very proud about our industry. We were talking about sort of careers and access, and some of the stories are fascinating. And I recall a story of a young lady who was a teenage mom, and I actually joined one of the professional services firms at an administration level. But she was very diligent, very focused, but she didn't have the natural opportunities to go straight on to university. And
certainly, yeah.
But she showed a lot of promise, and the firm actually then recognized that, sat with her, and as part of the normal review processes, what are your goals, your aspirations? And she shared her goals. And so they supported her to actually then attend part-time university here locally. She did exceptionally well. The firm then gave her a scholarship to go overseas, and she has continued on. She now has a professional certification. And so this young lady, a very talented young lady, that if we did not have this industry, may be stuck in a world where she'd be struggling to support her child. She is now able to give her child just incredible opportunities.
Certainly, yeah. This has just been a fantastic conversation, Jude. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm sure we'll try to get you back because there's a number of great points you're making. So in summary, we certainly thank you for coming on the show, sharing some of those statistics, and we hope to have you back on the show too. Just quickly, on behalf of the CFA Society, we've got the Charter Awards Dinner coming up January 6th. We've got 10 new charter recipients, so this is also a fantastic year. Thank you to all the listeners for listening to Moneysense, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Moneysense is brought to you with the support of OneTradeX. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online